Essential Self-Care Podcast, a podcast for those of us who are, let's face it, too busy for self-care. In this podcast, you will hear real life stories from people who leaned into their self-care as they were navigating life's storms. You'll learn practical tips, tools, and strategies to incorporate self-care into your own busy life as well. You'll hear from expert guests sharing their expertise on specific tools and modalities of self care to optimize your well being in your life, career, and relationships. I'm your host, Dr. Sheetal Ajmani. I am a physician, best-selling author, and founder of Radiant Living Institute, where I guide high achieving women to get unstuck and learn to live radiantly again through major life transitions. Quick disclaimer before we dive into the episode. Please know that this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Always seek the advice of your own health practitioner or mental health provider for your specific situation. Now, let's get started. Hello, and welcome to another solocast episode of the Essential Self-Care Podcast. I'm excited to be recording this today from my apartment as opposed to the podcast studio. And I'm excited to share some things with you today that have been on my mind for a few weeks now to share with you, actually. And so I'm excited to dive into it. And it stems from my own journey over the past few months, or actually of last fall. So I have alluded to in some recent episodes that last fall, I was going through kind of a tough time, just mentally, emotionally, just with some things that I've been going through on my own personal journey, some major life transitions within my own life, right? Primarily with pivoting in my career, with diving full on into entrepreneurship. And so a lot of things were coming up for me last fall, personally. And now that I am sort of on the other side of it and have worked through many of those things, just a number of sort of insights and realizations and lessons learned that I thought I would want to share with you here. So, first of all, any major life transition, right? For me, in the personal example that I'm using, it has been pivoting in my career, diving into entrepreneurship, but really any major life transition. And I've been through many over the course of my life of different situations, of different major life transitions. I've worked with clients facing many different transitions in their own life. So whatever it may be, whether it's career burnout or a divorce, or even these quote unquote positive life transitions as well, things like getting married or the birth of a child, can have a lot of, they all have some sense of grieving to it, right? Because you are losing a certain way, you are shedding a certain way of being, a certain way of living, right? With any transition that you are going through. And you're also welcoming in a new way of being, a new way of living, right? A new way of existing, a new way of life, a new quote unquote normal, you may say, right? And so there has to be this shedding away on one level so that you can create space to welcome in new, right? Like there has to be that. And within all of that, though, there can be such a wide array of emotions, right? There can be fear, there can be sadness, there is grief, there can be anger, there can be frustration, right? There can be fear of the uncertainty of the new, right? And if you think of it, you're kind of in this place where you can still sort of see what you're letting go of, what is being shed away. And yet you can't quite fully see and focus what is to come, right? Because there is this element of uncertainty, this element of newness there, right? So it can be this very uncomfortable place to be. And you can go through a whole range of emotions within a short time span as well, right? Within the course of a day or even an hour, you can feel those feelings of fear, excitement, uncertainty, joy, inspiration, grief, loss, right? You can feel all of those things. So it's such an interesting and pivotal time frame which is why I love working with clients who are navigating these major life transitions, because they always say that life's challenges are the greatest catalyst for self-empowerment. And it is, because when you're in that space, all of a sudden it becomes really clear to you what is most important and what needs to be shed away, right? And it's hard. It can be uncomfortable. Trust me, I know it. Like I said, I've just come through to the other side of this as well. But through that, there's a couple things that I want to share, a couple other things that I want to share with you. One is that during that time, I remember having lots of breakdowns, right? Like just crying and just breaking down. And, I know, a lot of times you can hear people have talked about like breakdowns as being a breakthrough, right? And it very much is, right? But I was thinking a little bit more about that. Like, what was happening during those breakdowns, right? What was happening is that all of those limiting beliefs, all of those expectations that were primarily self-imposed were breaking down, were shedding away, right? That breakdown was a breakdown of all of these egoic structures that I was still holding on to, that needed to be broken down and released so that I could continue this journey of living as authentically as possible, right? As much in alignment with my true nature and my true self as possible, right? And we all go through this, right? And I think that it is through the pain, through these challenges, that we break down, that force us, right? I mean, how else? I wish there was another way that we could see it. And maybe there is. I don't know. But so far on my journey, it has been going through, it has been that these painful experiences have been the greatest catalyst for it, of a breaking down. So when you're breaking down, that's nothing to be ashamed of. That's nothing to feel embarrassed about, right? Your emotions need to have a place to go, first of all. So when you break down, whether that means that you're crying or ranting or venting to someone, right? What you're doing is you're giving those emotions a place to go, which is so important. The word emotion comes from emovere, which means to move out. So those emotions need to have a place to go, right? So when you are having a breakdown, crying, venting, ranting, whatever it may be, you are giving a place for those emotions to go, which is so important, because we know also through trauma research that if we do not give our emotions a place to go, what happens is that they end up staying stuck within our body. And then that can lead to actually physical symptoms within your body, right? Things like pain or insomnia or panic attacks or things like that. So it's so important to give it a place to go, first of all. And also, so that's, on a very like physical level, emotional, mental, physical level. And then on, sort of this spiritual level as well. Like that breakdown is letting go of certain aspects of your egoic self that may be keeping you stuck, that may be keeping you limited, right? And so what happens when you break through that, when you break those barriers down, when you break those limitations down, there's this sense of openness, there's this sense of freedom, right? So I wanted to kind of reframe. I thought that that was something that I felt in a very tangible way a few months ago. And so I wanted to share that with you and just kind of reframe this idea of what breakdowns are, and also to help, release any shame that may be surrounding that as well. Like, oh my goodness, it's not shame. It's a beautiful experience, right? Because through that breaking down, you're finding this openness, you're finding this freedom, you're finding a path towards living more authentically and in greater alignment. And how beautiful is that? The other thing that I wanted to share, another, sort of realization that I had, was that this journey that I went on last fall, and I had this realization kind of using last fall as an example for myself. But then when I look back at other major transitions in my life, other major challenging moments and seasons of my life, I find this to hold true as well. And it's this sequence of events of grasping, suffering, and letting go. And that's exactly what happened. And so I invite you to think about if that's something that's happened in your own life as well, right? And now, what do I mean by that, right? I was grasping onto a certain way that I thought that my life should look, right? A certain way that I thought, in the example of what I was going through most recently, what my entrepreneurship journey should look like, right? Now, should is a word that I've been trying to and working on getting rid of from my vocabulary for quite a while, because what are those shoulds? Those are just expectations, right? And these were for me in that situation, and really looking back in so many situations in my life, were self-imposed expectations, right? I made them up myself. And I was grasping onto them. And what did that do? What did that grasping onto these expectations do? It led to suffering, right? It led to not feeling good about myself, not feeling good about where I am on my journey, right? Of all of that inner dialogue, right? It led to so much suffering, right? So from these self-imposed expectations led to self-imposed suffering, right? Is anyone else relating to this? I know it can't be just me. So it led to this self-imposed suffering, right? And when that self-imposed suffering got to be too much to bear, what happened? I was able to let it go, right? When you get tired of the suffering, or when it becomes too much to bear, that's when you let go. That's when you release. Now, I wish there was another way to go through this process, and maybe there is, and maybe there are some enlightened beings who can just go straight to the letting go part without having to experience the grasping and suffering part. But I am still very much on this human journey. And for me, that is the path that I had to go through. And I look back at, now I often will share with people, that last fall was pretty hard for me. But I had to go through it. I had to go through that process, that journey of grasping, suffering, and letting go to get to the other side. And that was the journey I had to go on. And when I think back to, like I mentioned earlier, other times in my life that were challenging seasons, that was the sequence as well, this grasping, suffering, and then a letting go, right? And so combining that idea with that idea of breakdown, what is a breakdown? It's breaking down those limiting beliefs, those expectations, those shoulds, those egoic structures that we've created in our mind. And what happens when we're just on this human journey, and there are these beautiful stories in yoga mythology as well that depict this in very beautiful ways as well, though, is that once you break down some of those egoic structures, in other words, some of those limiting beliefs or expectations or conditioned structures that we've built up within our own mind's eye, within our own life, right? Once we break down one set of those, what happens? We're faced with another challenge, right? That brings up another set of these, limiting beliefs that maybe were not top of our mind before, but it brings them up so that we can release them again, right? And that is this process. That is this journey that we are on here, right? As souls, as humans, to continue to evolve, to continue to grow. And that's why, like I've said on other episodes, that's why this is a journey. That's why this self-care path is a journey. That's why even many of my guests who have come on, I mean, almost every single guest who has been on has said, it's a journey. It doesn't end. It's not like you just like all of a sudden got it and you're like, okay, I'm done. I got it. I don't need to deal with that anymore. It's not like that. It's a continual journey. That's why even though I have been actively and intentionally on this path for well over 20 years now, for over 2 decades, I'm still learning. I'm still having these challenging moments. I'm still having to have and lean on people in my life to reflect back to me, even things that I have said before, even things that I have taught before. I am needing people in my life to reflect that back to me, because we are all on this journey, right? The thing is, hopefully, we learn and we continue to grow and engage in that process so that it looks different each phase of that journey, because we are continuing to learn more about ourselves, more about how we exist within the world around us, right? How we exist within our communities, within our relationships, within our careers, within fulfilling our soul's purpose and mission. And hopefully through this whole process, continuing to engage and lean into the process, through the journey, to let go of all of these things that are no longer serving us, so that we can continue to live authentically and in as great of alignment as we can with our true nature and our true selves. So that was just a bit of deep reflection on my part. I hope that you found it helpful. I hope that some of this episode resonated with you, and I would really love to hear from you. I always love to hear from you. So a couple ways that we can do that is, one is go to my website, radiantlivinginstitute.com. You will see a contact page there. Send me a note. Let me know what about this episode resonated with you the most. Let me know if you have any questions. I read and reply to every single message myself, and I really do want to hear from you. You can also find me on Instagram or LinkedIn. You can send me direct messages there. Again, I read and reply to every message on my own, and I really do love hearing from you. I really do love supporting you on your journey as well. So definitely do that. Let's keep this conversation going. And thanks again for tuning into another episode of the Essential Self-Care Podcast. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Essential Self-Care Podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a positive review, and share this episode with someone you know. And remember, your free guide, 6 simple yet powerful steps to create your radiant life, is waiting for you at radiantlivinginstitute.com. Download it today.